Good evening, Avik. How are you? Thank you for joining.
My pleasure, Mujib. Good evening.
Yeah. Good evening, guys. Can anyone confirm me that our voice are clear so that we can go ahead with the session? So, Avik, I think people are joining quickly. So we'll give a minute of time. Good
Sure.
evening, guys. Good evening. Good evening. Is our voice clear? Please send me a message if our voice is clear. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Everything is clear. Very good. So we'll give a minute of time, Avik, basically, so that other people joins in. I'm happy to have you here. So maybe it's early morning. Uh, yeah. So we'll have a minute of time. In the meantime, we'll start this session. And I really want to thank you for joining this session, where a lot of people are eagerly waiting to hear from you that what made you to come to this position and how you have made this possible, what are the hurdles you have had and all those stuff. So before I start with the further discussion or a session, can we have a quick 1 minute of the talk from you so that we can go ahead with the discussion?
Yeah, sure. I think, what we want to talk about today is, all this changed scenario because of the pandemic, the COVID, right? So I think let's build on that. I mean, what is it? How is it impacting? And it's not just impacting, the space that we're talking about, clinical trials or the pharma industry, but it's impacting everywhere, right? Whether you're a student, schools are closed, whether you're an IT, a professional, offices are, work from home and, collaboration. So I think it's impacting in every corner of the, our lifestyles and how we eat, how we breathe, how we think, how we drive, how we commute. So yeah, let's focus on more on how it has impacted specifically the clinical trial space. That's near and dear to all of us, and we can build on that.
Yeah, so thank you, Avik, for the quick words. Everyone is talking about only one big situation. The situation has changed. We should have got ready for this situation, but somehow it's late. We have to make sure that we are ready to get that changes into our lives. So I wanted Avik, people to know that what is your journey? So where you are standing now after completion of your graduation, and what made you to start this Clinops? So that's so many people are asking this question. So because so many people wants to work under someone as an employee, so you really have to have a lot of planning, execution, and so much of thinking to come up as an entrepreneur. So what made you to become like a founder and CEO to start this Clinops, and what is your journey?
Yeah, I mean, so I have a technology background, graduated from India, came here for my master's, did my MBA, and then worked in Silicon Valley for two startups. The first one was acquired by Persistent, and the second one we sold to SAP. And in the second one, I was there for almost a good 10 years. I was heading global delivery. I was traveling all around the world, every single state in the US and 40, 45 countries globally. So it was a different kind of life, but I enjoyed it. I was still single, and every Monday morning I would wake up in a different continent. It's all fun, but then after the acquisition, I was there for escrow for a couple of years. And then I moved on, right? So along the way, I got involved with a startup in India, focusing on last mile healthcare, right? So that also helped me understand or connect with the challenges of collecting healthcare data and how difficult it is, how challenging it is, and how do we solve those kind of problems. And I still sit on the board of that company, iCure. And then, as luck would have it, I got married to a doctor. And after coming to India, my wife moved into medical research. Okay? So her first job led her into running clinical trials. And that got me interested in this space. And in my previous role, I was working a lot on the enterprise applications, a lot of data, right? But for enterprise data, right? Master data management, those kind of Johnson & Johnson, Merck, several others in the pharma industry. But never into the clinical data space. But then, since I had that data background, it got me interested that, when you start running global clinical trials, how do you collect the data? What are the challenges of collecting data? What can you do with the data, right? All of those things, right? So that led me into more, getting more interested in the space. And I actually joined a couple of her studies as a healthy volunteer and went through the whole process. This is downtown Silicon Valley. And I saw still even then, there are so many, manual processes, traditional archaic processes. Me coming from a technology world saw that as an outsider, saw a lot of opportunity in trying to see if we can do our bit to streamline this process, solve the process. So that's how Clinops started.
Yeah, I think people who are listening this interview, Avik is basically an IIT person, but still Avik has joined a clinical trial as a healthy volunteer to understand the process, how the drug research happens, then identified the challenges, the hurdles, and how better we can make the drug to reach the market as quickly as possible, how technology can be implemented into the drug research and clinical research, how the time can be reduced to make sure that drug is reaching to the right patient with the right information, right data. So that made Avik to start his own organization. And I'm really happy and I really appreciate Avik to come up with this kind of planning and strategy to start with this mobile technologies or sensors, or people are talking historic way of collecting the informed consent on papers and holding that papers, archiving in big rooms, and suddenly a fire accident, earthquake comes, then how best we can use the technology to make sure this. And I think your company tagline, data science for life sciences. So that itself makes so much of goosebumping on body, saying that data science, how data is playing important role in current scenario, and we are living in such a society, right, Avi? Can you tell what is the importance of that data which we are collecting from drug research? Is that really needed to collect and make sure that data is being submitted to regulatory body in a right term or the turnaround time? So can you elaborate those things for me, Avi?
Yeah. So see, at the end of the day, we run these clinical trials for what, right? To get a drug
Yeah.
that is safe for patients, right?
Yeah.
So that is the most tangible output of this whole process of drug discovery, of running a clinical trial.
Yeah.
And that's what the pharma industry is looking for, right? And if you look at the current situation, the whole 7 billion people around the world is eagerly waiting for that one magical drug.
Yes, yes, yes.
So that's the most tangible outcome of this whole exercise.
Yeah.
What is the next most tangible outcome?
Uh,
It's the data behind the drug.
Wonderful.
Right? You run 100 trials, 90-95% of them will fail. Only few will succeed. So you'll get only a few drugs. But, and those drugs are also approved based on the data behind that whole clinical trial. Right? So FDA needs a very high quality data, or regulatory bodies need a very high quality data, meeting certain standards before they can approve on the drug. Right? So that is very important, the data behind the drug. What is also important is the 95% of the data which has failed, have we learned from that? Okay? 5 years later, can we reduce this failure rate to 70%, 50% because we have learned more from our failures? Trials are run for about 300 odd years now.
Right.
It's still at that level, right? A huge failure. But I think there's an enormous amount of data out there, Mujib, which the industry is not harnessing that well. We could probably do better by learning from our mistakes, learning from the failed trials, learning from failed drugs, synthetic trials, and a lot of other things can be done if you understand the value of the drug, right? So, the technology firms are here to help along those lines. And I think that's one of the areas that we want to focus on, which is, or we are focusing on helping our customers to make meaningful use of the data that we collect. And collect it well right from the beginning, right? It's not like you collect as you said, right? Paper-based, then put it in binders and then folders and then cupboards. And, you see these hospitals where there's dearth of beds for patients, but there's no dearth of cupboards, taking a huge amount of real estate, where they could have, treated patients. So if you start it that way, it takes a lot of effort to get to the diamond quality, which is submissible to the regulatory bodies.
Right.
But if you do it right, as you said, mobile technologies, wearables, connected devices, and all this, seamless use of technology, right? Getting it right, ready, or getting it close to diamond quality right at the beginning, then the amount of effort required is relatively a lot lesser before it gets to submission. So those are some for focus areas.
Yeah,
and when
I think, yeah, that's rightly said, because somehow, Avik, I'm seeing that our education system, we are still depending on papers, we are still depending on writing the exams in papers, and we really don't know where our books goes. I really don't know where I have put my books. But if the data is there in a tool or an application, somewhere I get it out and I take back that data and look back that data. So I think that plays a major role, and we are living in a very much on data-centric world, where with a single click we need a data, and that too with a lot of sophisticated artificial intelligence and all those things. If we have the data, so by sitting here, I want to know how many patients are there in India, and where is my potential patients are in India. I want to collect that, and I want to conduct a clinical trial without asking the patient to come to hospital. So that's, I think that's your portfolio in CliniOps, that virtual clinical trials. So there is a big word called as virtual clinical trial. So Avi, can you tell about this virtual clinical trials, how it will change the entire world? Now, during pandemic situation only we are talking. So I think people does not need to go to office, people does not need to go to hospitals, and people does not need to go and do a historic way of doing this. So now, can you put some words or emphasize this, that what is this virtual trials and how ClinioPs has implemented that virtual clinical trials?
Okay. So good question, Mujib. So see, you're talking about COVID, but I think, as an industry, we have just crossed a one-way door. There is no coming back. Along this way, we have made significant changes. FDA or other regulatory bodies are also making all these changes, right? And it's good to see the openness of adopting technology. Okay, and there have been instances, as you may have noticed, in the last 3 months, things which could have taken like years are happening in minutes or hours or days. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing that the industry itself is quite risk averse, and for rightly so, right? You're dealing with healthcare data. Am I audible?
Yeah. It was, I think, poor connection from my side. I think, Avi,
Okay.
you are discussing about virtual trials. I'm really sorry, it was poor connection. There is a technology that it's out of control of human beings when it gets into poor connection. Yeah.
So, yeah, I see one note there. Virtual trial is same as traditional trials. No, it is not. It's the future of trial. It's just the opposite. So FDA calls it decentralized trials. Okay, so let me just, for the the interest of the audience, traditionally trials were done in a very centralized way, where all the patients would come to one hospital or center or site, and trials would be done there. Right now, there is a trend. Can we collect? So now, what is the challenge? Right, challenge is patients are not able to come to the hospital. Why? Because there is travel ban and there is lockdown. There is uncertainty on the roads. The hospitals don't have bandwidth because there's a huge surge of COVID patients. And because of a lot of these COVID patients, sometimes patients like clinical trial patients may feel a sense of risk, or in going there, because they may get infected in the vicinity of. So putting all this together, there's a risk of patients coming to the hospitals, right? So can technology help collect that same data virtually, which means Can we use sensors? Can we use just phone call? Can we do some applications talking to each other? Can we do it remotely? Can we get wearable sensor devices, connected at patient home that seamlessly pushes that data back into the system, clinical trial system? So those are basically what's called virtual clinical trials. There are many terms that, in this space intermingled. FDA or the regulatory bodies call it decentralized trials. So centralized trial, it is everybody coming at the hospital. Decentralized trial is connecting in a decentralized. So that's one. There is also another term called virtual trial, Mujeeb, as you rightly said. So since you're not coming in person, there's a tendency to call it virtual. There's also a term called hybrid trials, where it's some here, some there, together we collect all the data. So there are many different terms, but again, it all means the same. How can we, so right now, one of the big challenges that the industry is facing is big part of the 70% or more of the clinical trials are put on hold.
Right.
For all these reasons, right? So business continuity is at risk.
Right.
So trials are not happening.
Right.
So how can we restart these trials? Right. So now we need to look into, okay, if a patient needs 10 visits for every patient, there's a 10 visit for this particular study needed. And traditionally the protocol was written so that all 10 visits needed to be, happen in the hospital. Now, can we rethink of a way where 7 of those can be done from home and only 3 visits are needed, right? If we minimize the number of visits, maybe we can restart some of the trials. There are certain other types of trials where we could do a lot more. There are certain other types of trials where we could do a lot less. No, we need at least 7, 8 visits to the hospital. Maybe these 2 can be done from home. So it varies from one spectrum to the other, but there would be a conscious effort from this part of the sponsors and CROs to actually maximize the amount of data collection remotely from home. To get these trials started, right? So that's one. And the second is the thinking itself, that all future trials going forward, we need to bring these kind of technology adoption into the mainstream, into making sure that they are actually designed right from the very beginning in a way where we can leverage technology more and reduce the dependency on centralized trials or site-based trials.
I think, thank you, Avik, and that made very clear indication that the future is about virtual trials. So pandemic has given a big lesson for us that wherever you are staying, stay there, use technology, conduct clinical trials, bring up the new ideas and implement it. So I think somehow we have learned so many lessons with this pandemic. Still we are sitting at home. We have to continue our life. We have to continue our research work, and we have to work on the same lines. So I think the next one which I wanted to speak to the people is Cliniop specially has developed a tool where people think that use of technology is very tough, and you have to have coding knowledge, you have to have so much of technology knowledge, or else we cannot learn, and all those words. If you are not adaptive to technology, if you are not ready to get changed with the technology, technology will crush us and will go. So technology is never going to stop us, and technology is going to crush us and go us. So now question is, Cliniops has specifically developed a tool or an application where it works without an internet. So that is a point to be noted, that condition applies to our point. It works without an internet. So you can collect the patient data without an internet. You can go to a place of the patient, and in remote village, you have a patient and you still collect the data, and you don't need to have an internet facility. You are collecting not in a laptop or a desktop. You are collecting in a simple tab or a mobile device. You come back to an internet location, the data will be backed up. You see how beautiful technology is giving us opportunity. And we start saying that reason we need to have technology, we need to learn coding, we need to know about all those things. So I think, Avik, can you put some words for this people, because people are worried about technology to get changed, because I am basically a pharmacologist. I did a lot of research on technology also. So these people are still in assumption that technology is something which is dangerous, and if we don't learn, we will be dying. Something like that, these people will be afraid.
No, so one thing we have to understand, we cannot, coming from the technology background, we cannot design a technology and throw it to you. Okay, we need to understand what your challenges are.
Right.
If you're running a trial on the ground, we need to
Right.
understand what the challenges are.
Right.
How can we make your life better, right? How can we work around your workflow so that you don't have to change much, right? Without doing that, if I create a a fabulous technology and dump it on you, it will probably be a failure, right? So that's one of the things that I wanted to share here, which is understanding the ground challenges and the ground realities. So let's just take the workflow. How typically what happens? A patient comes to a hospital, right? And when it comes, you have already worked, some EDCs, legacy EDCs, traditional, and let's just say two examples, and anything in between in that spectrum, right? So one is let's say a government hospital in India, and let's talk about another, which is a very high-end hospital in, let's say MGH, Mass General Hospital, which is Harvard University Hospital. So there are very different types of challenges there in both, right? But there are challenges, right? So in the government hospital in India, the patient comes in, and the hospital has already received access to some EDC, right? But they are not able to use the EDC to its fullest, right? So what they do is they typically take a paper printout of the case report forms, and it's called PCRF, paper case report form. So the staff will have stacks of that paper forms, and when the patient comes in, data will actually be collected on those forms.
Right, right.
And then those forms will go inside a folder. That folder will go inside a patient binder. That binder will go inside a cupboard, and they are stacked. That is called source data. Right. It's very important. Even after the trial is over, we can't trash that data. Even after that data comes back into the system, we can't track. That needs to be saved for a good decade or so. It costs a lot of money. It has to be saved in a GCP compliant archival. I mean, it's a lot of time, money wasted, real estate wasted, opportunity cost. Those places where you're stacking these cupboards could actually have beds for patients. So there's it's not the right use of having those in the hospital in that way. So that's one aspect of it, right? Now let's say, okay, we have done all of these things. Now what? Okay. Now Mujib, your camera went off. Now
sorry, it got dropped off. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. So now the CRO industries are facing this challenge, which is at that point, they have to send their employees at risk to send them to the hospitals to transcribe that data from the paper source into the, whatever EDC they are using. Not only that, at that point of time, you have two sets of data. One is the paper source for the hospital, and one is the electronic source for the sponsor. So now the regulatory bodies need a third person to be sent. Again, the CROs are putting their own employees at risk to send a monitor there. What does the monitor do? The monitor goes to the hospital, travels to the hospital, which is a problem now, looks at the paper and looks at the transcribed data and makes sure they two match.
Yes, yes.
That's called source data verification, SDV. Yes. Without doing that, the trial can't proceed. And that's why we are receiving several requests right now from several CROs around the world, including India, that we are not able to continue with our studies because of these challenges. Can your system help? So yes, we can. And what we developed is, let's just start with, it's called eSource, electronic source. And this has been published by FDA guidelines way back, September 2013. So it's been like 7 years. It's still not mainstream, unfortunately, because of this risk-averse industry. But now that is the foundation of how we can transform this and get these trials started back up and continue with the business continuity. So what we are doing is we configure all these requirements, the case report forms, and they all show up on a mobile device.
Right.
So now when the patient comes in, and this device now works, and this is out of the shelf, any iPad, iPad mini, Android phone, and Android tablets, Samsung, so whatever, any Android or mobile device, you can actually look at this forms all showing up there for study, fully offline, in fully offline mode. And FDA has given guidelines how to handle, let's say the tablet is stolen or the tablet falls off and breaks, and what happens to the data.
Right.
No different from the requirements. What if the paper gets stolen, coffee spills off, or some fire happens, or so there are guidelines of how to save that data, okay,
right,
in a compliant way. So by the way, we are fully compliant, 21 Part 11 compliance,
right,
FDA's, and then HIPAA compliance, and then we did our ISO, so ISO 9001, ISO 27001, and we just finished our GDPR compliance for a large phase 3 study we are doing for a European customer. So we have all these compliances in place. We're doing it the right way. Many trials through our system has gone FDA approvals.
right.
So the bottom line is, we align with the workflow of the site. So we are not putting anything more on them, to kind of get burdened with a lot of additional technology. No. You just continue the same way you're doing. You write them on paper. Okay, now you just, do them on tablets, and there are drop downs. There are many ways to making it easy. How do you feel? Just, scrap, 7.
Yeah.
So there are many easier ways of doing things, right? Informed consent. You don't need a lengthy form and go through it and paper and then scan and upload. You can read it on the tablet, along with another person who is orchestrating the informed consent. And they sign on the tablet. The other person, the CRC, the clinical research coordinator, they also countersign. And immediately an informed consent form is generated with the signatures, with the timestamp, with the geolocation. It's very simple and straightforward.
Right.
There is no chance of any challenges or issues. And again, access of that data, right? Who gets to see that, right? So informed consent, when you do, the signature is considered PHI, protected health information. So it can't be exposed to the sponsor. So there are 17, 18 different fields which are PHI according to FDA. We mask them, redact them, right? So certain types of users who log in will see the whole form, will see the CRC signature, but will not see the patient signature because it's a PHI.
Right.
But the other type who are like need to monitor, they need to see the access and all that. So they will see it. So we can give selective access to certain types of roles so that the informed consent process can be done seamlessly. But bottom line is, you now don't have to deal with a lot of these, paper-based archaic processes, but can be done much more seamlessly, right? So that's how it'll progress. So once you do that, data collection on tablet, completely mobile, what you do next is you eliminate binders, folders, cupboards in a big way, or at least you minimize them. Use them only when absolutely needed. Otherwise, you have an option to not use them. Third, you now eliminate the need for the CROs to send, transcriptors to transcribe that data from the paper to the, that's a long process. That's a lengthy process. And that's a requirement to be at the site because source data cannot go outside the site. You eliminate that process in a big way. Next is SDV. That costs 30-40% of the clinical trial budget. It's a big one. And you have to travel all around the world. I mean, if you're running a trial, let's say 20 sites across India, from Hyderabad, you have to travel, all these monitors have to travel all over. You can big eliminate that by not going in, because the moment you sync the data, which can be done, every minute, every hour, every 4 hours, or worst case at the end of the day, right? So all these hospitals have internet. The challenge is point of care internet, just where the patient-doctor interaction is happening. So you eliminate that part, right? You decouple the two, so now you have decent, asynchronous, So you collect them on offline, and in that corner room, the IT room or whatever across the aisle, you just go there. The tablet automatically catches the internet and Wi-Fi, and then synchronizes the data. So seamless, right? No try. So, and that's why you don't need monitoring as well, because according to FDA, the first point of data entry is called source data. If it is collected electronically, it is called electronic source data. Right? So that's, and as long as source data is electronic, we can handle it in a much more seamless way. So that data is then, accessed or given access remotely for the monitors to do RSDV, remote source data verification. So monitors don't need to, and that's one of the big things that if you implement eSource in your studies, you can actually, for the CROs basically, you can actually get these studies started back up. Okay? I also wanted to throw out here that if you already have existing EDCs which you don't want to move from in your current implementations and stuff, we can provide seamless integration of our resource back to your EDC also. Right. So regardless, I mean, anything that we can do to help these studies started back up, absolutely. I think that's what the whole industry is looking for, is how do we get studies started back up. So a lot of companies are coming together, collaborating, joining hands, working together to make things because nobody was prepared for this. Everybody was caught off guard, right?
Yeah.
And industry has, the pandemic has pushed the envelope to its limit. I mean, from a completely risk-averse industry, now you have to embrace technology in a way that you can get all this started, and all in a span of a couple of months. It's just a remarkable time that we're going through.
Right. I think for people who are listening to Avik's session, one thing which you have to understand, Avik is speaking most of important points. Though Avik is from IT background, he's speaking regarding of pharma background. We are from pharma background. Sometimes we may not know most important words Avik is speaking. Avik has spoken about one important point, which is 21 CFR Part 11, which means that the data which is captured on paper is same as the data which is captured on mobile. Avik has spoken about one more most important part, which is HIPAA. It means that your patient confidentiality will never break. So remember these points. We are developing technology as per the regulatory bodies and as per your ICH, GCPs and all those things. We are making sure that technology is reducing the time, technology is reducing the money, technology is reducing the time to travel. And one more thing, the data, the patient data will be stored in servers, which is very secured location. So many people are putting questions saying that if the data is been backed up correctly or not, because this is PHI. So you understand it or no? FDA has a very low tolerance if the data confidentiality is broken, or GCP has a very low tolerance that the patient data cannot be broken down. In India, that's a different story, but in US FDA, it's a very strict regulations that patient confidentiality have to be maintained. I think, Avik, can you tell a little bit about the data confidentiality, or is this data is secured? That's what people are putting questions. So can we have a word about it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So these are, these are not afterthoughts. Okay, it's part of your design thinking that this data is confidential. This is the way it has to be done, right? So there is no if and but. I mean, it has to be done the way it is. It has to be done the way it is. And when you submit that data, it has to be that golden standard when you submit it to the regulator. Now, there are two ways to get there. One is you can start in a very archaic way, which is the the current way of doing manual, paper-based transcription, monitoring, source data verification, and then to query resolution, data management, and eventually you'll get to that level. Right? It takes time, money, and effort. The other is you start very close to the diamond level. You have since you're collecting data digitally, you put all your edit checks right there.
Right.
So even in offline mode, you collect the data, and let's say you do something wrong. Let's say I'm collecting blood pressure, and instead of 120, I write 720 on paper. So that becomes the source document, right? So it eventually gets caught much later in the game during query resolution. Very difficult to handle. And once you handle that, you again have to come back to the site and say, check it. And they have to go to binders, folders, and take it out. It takes. Now, in our system or any e-source system, let's say, in a completely offline mode, you enter 720. The system will generate a pop-up saying, hey, this is out of range, please fix.
Right.
So you're changing that even in offline mode right there, and that is the source data. The moment you change, again, in complete offline mode, it generates all the audit trails. It says that first data entry was by this person at this timestamp, and that data was 720. Second data entry was by this person, which is 120 at this timestamp, and the reason for change is da. So what it does, it makes the data very clean at the point of care, right where it is being collected.
Right.
And what it does downstream, it saves you so much of effort along all these processes and saves you a query. Each query costs a lot.
Right.
And there are thousands and thousands of queries generated.
Yes. Yes.
We have reduced that to a significant amount. Let me take you a couple of examples. I think I missed one of you on your earlier question. You talked about, how you do in, not so, emerging world conditions and stuff. So when we first started, we actually, our initial customers were academia. So we worked with the Harvards, the Stanfords, the Boston University, Boston Medical Center, quite a few high-end good universities in running large global trials. And it also, I was fortunate to get an opportunity to publish, as a co-author with the Harvards, with the Boston Universities of the world. And these are large global trials across 20, 25 countries, in more than 10, 15 countries in Africa, and a large study with sites in India, Papua New Guinea, Fiji, Haiti, Indonesia, and Kenya, Mozambique, Dominican Republic, you name it. I mean, a lot of very difficult geographies, okay, very difficult internets, very low computer literacy, okay, but none of this were a problem. We did all these studies completely paperless. We did not travel to any of these sites.
Right.
Why? Because by design, the system is designed in a way where a first-line nurse in Africa, let's say, should be very comfortable using it with a 1 hour remote WebEx training.
Wonderful.
That's how we have designed. So we didn't have to travel to any of these 20, 25, 30 countries globally. Sitting in California, sitting remotely here, and our team back in India, we've been able to provide the amount of training, which is a couple of hours and we generate the study logs. So they're all, and then they are given access to the database. And you'll be surprised, Mujib, we hardly, very minimal queries that we get, because the frontline nurses are very comfortable using the tablets and the simple user interface that we have designed, that they basically take it through. And whenever they get stuck, we have a very seamless, customer support process to walk them through, to do the screen share if needed, and kind of solve their problem right away. But the point being that it is not a system which is a very clumsy, complex, that you have to send people on site for 2 weeks of intense training. That's not how it's designed. It's a very 1 or 2 hours, 1 hour for data collection, 1 hour for monitoring, and that's it. That's all you need to do. And we have done these kind of trials across many of these countries. I'll take one example. It's a large study. So the system is also very scalable. It's a large study of 26,000 patients across 5 countries. Okay. Oh. It has been published in PubMed and all these other labs, places, and it was submitted to WHO. It was done in collaboration with 3 of the top 10 pharmas and one of the top pharma foundation in the world. And the data was submitted to WHO. One of the site was actually India, and the requirement was almost close to 9,000 people, close to 10,000 patients, just in India alone, of the 26,000. And it was in a very remote setting, right? And typically what happens is, when you run a trial, it takes significant, several months to get the study ready, database ready, and all that stuff. From that months, we have brought it down to just weeks. Leveraging, CDISC compliant form sets, leveraging the dataset forms that we built, basically CRFs. And then after it is started, and let's say last patient out, from then it also takes several months to do the DB lock, right? Because you have to cleanse the data before it can be locked. In our case, it has come down to weeks, because the data is very clean. And that's where I wanted to make this point, which is, typically in these kind of huge, large global trials, in those kind of remote settings and stuff, the number of queries you get on an average, just ballpark, is somewhere in the range of 50 to 100 queries per patient.
Right.
And you're talking about 26,000 patients. Can you imagine the number of queries you get? Can you imagine the amount of effort it takes to fix those data, cleanse those data, get it ready into submission readiness? And guess the number of queries we got in our system when we ran this on our system. 2 queries for every 100 patient.
Yeah, yeah.
From
So,
100 queries per patient to 2 queries per 100 patient. So it's like a paradigm shift. It's not an incremental benefit. It's a and they actually did it without much of help from us after the study go live, because they actually started loving the system. So right now we are doing several studies with that same group, and it's not because the sponsors are very happy with us because they see real-time dashboards, graphs, charts, real-time notifications, all of that, but also the sites love it, that they are also with the paper, archaic, GCP compliant, archival, paper based, if an audit gets triggered, there's a lot of, tension, stress and all that. So now everything they have is on their fingertips. And I'm talking about sites which are very, very resource poor, which are emerging world, which are in not the, best of the hospital settings of the world, but, normal, you and I know the kind of settings that we're talking about.
right.
So it works there as well. So.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful effort, Avik, you are putting, and Clinops is doing a lot of work. And people who are listening to this session, I wanted to tell what is about Clinops different systems. See, there is a word which is called as integration. Okay, a very beautiful word which is called as integration. So, how different data can be integrated in one mobile or a one tab? Let it be electronic data, let it be an ICF, let it be a lab data, let it be ePro data, let it be a coding data, let it be a IRT data, let it be a serious adverse event. All data can be integrated to one system. That is the beauty of Clinops. Avik, I will love to hear that integration across all system. I know that this is a very tough time for people who are listening, but yeah, I wanted to know, and people wanted to know that how this ideas came that all data can be integrated in one system. You take one system, everything is there.
So one way of looking at it is, and we have a patent filed on this one, which is, see, if everybody develops different systems, right, there is a need for integration. And yes, it is great, but it has its own challenges as well, right? So let's say I use an EDC system from company X. I use a ICF system from company Y. I use a CTMS system company Z. I use a coder from somebody else. I use a ePro from somebody else, and then you have to integrate all of that. It's not an easy task, and each of these vendors may have their own release timelines. So every time they release a new release, it becomes difficult to integrate and validate and make sure that it's all working in harmony, complete sync. So that's the current landscape, which is designed like this. Each application on its own. So let's say you take an EDC, it has its own configuration, its own data collection, own functionality, own visualization reports, and all that. Same if you take another CTMS, again, own configuration, own functionality, own visualization data. So what we do, and the thing is, all of these systems are required to support just one study.
Yes.
It's the same data.
True.
It's the same
True.
patient. It's the same, everything. There's the same team that is, CRC.
Yes.
So why do I have to enter every single user access to all of these 5 different systems, 7 different systems? Why do I have to have all this patient data in each of these systems, or a subset of that data in each of these systems? So that's just unnecessary work, right? Data portability is a challenge. Yeah. Sometimes people have to enter manually as well, and sometimes integrations may not work. And so what we did is, and this is the pattern that we filed, which is we flipped it in 4 verticals. The first one is configuration, where we put the the patient and user. Basically, it's user management, access control, labs, whatever, every single thing that is required to do as part of the configuration in one single place, not in EDC, CTMS, ePro, IRT, ICF, no, just one place. Second is our data collection platform, which is a mobile, offline, compliant, fully digital. Right? So all data is collected there, whether it's CRF data, whether it's ePro data, whether it's informed consent, patient signature data, lab data, device, every single data is collected in that one place. The third one are incremental functions, modules. EDC module, ePro module, ICF module, IRT module, Coder module, CTMS module, da, da, da. They all talk to the same database.
Right.
And then finally, one visualization layer. So that will show the graphs, charts, reports, dashboards, whatever you want to see from either the CTMS or EDC or ePro or ICF or whatever. So now you don't need to have like 7-10 different usernames for this application, this, that password, this, sometimes they forget. And sometimes the data portability is not in place that, I'm seeing data which is already in EDC, but they have not been, transcribed into the CTMS side of things. So this is, no. So all those are gone now. Just single one database, which all these different modules are talking to, and they are all in sync. So for example, if you want to see, let's say you do the planning of CTMS, that after the end of the 3rd month, I want to see site A, B, and C enroll 50, 50, 50, 50, and 30 patients. That's the plan.
Right.
In the CTMS, you want to ensure that is it really happening at the end of the 3rd month, right? So where will the CTMS know? The CTMS will know from the EDC data how many has been enrolled. And then they will come and match that, okay, is it more than 50, less than 50, more than 30, less than 30? Where will the EDC know? EDC will know from how many has been gone through the informed consent process. So the ICF module, right? But where will they know from somewhere? So basically, they're all so very interlinked. But now, given that we have only one database where all of these modules are talking to each other, my CTMS is also real time. In real time, it knows exactly which table to go to check how many patients has been enrolled and what is the time from start date. And has ended the 3rd month ended? If yes, where do we stand? Is it 49 patients, 51 patients, less, more? Accordingly, it will give you a red, green, or yellow. So
right.
in real time. You don't have to do anything. No transcription, no re-entry of the data, and no validation or of integration. It's basically by design. Right. Single system. That's why we call it an app suite, where all these are different apps. And this is the new way of doing things, right? I mean, historically, the clinical trials evolved over the last several, decades. The last, the EDCs, like the big EDCs, the 2 most largest ones, they came into the market, the Meditators and the Oracle Phase Forward earlier, came into the market in the mid 90s. So it's been a good 25 years. It's ripe for disruption. Right. It's ripe for disruption because technology has gone by leaps and bounds since then. And we can leverage that to our fullest to design the new wave of how we run clinical trials going forward.
Right. So I think, Avik, some people are asking one question about how technology is growing. So I think for viewers, I want to tell you that if you are not ready to take up the technology changes, so technology is not going to leave anyone. So it will give you more opportunity. Remember, as much as you grow technologies, we are not losing jobs. We are getting new kind of jobs, more technical jobs. So people who are listening, we have to be very assured to live in the future. So this is what is the future. Clinops has thought about future. So I think one of the question from my side or discussion, whatever it is, basically Indian companies are more towards generic molecules, and some companies have started some research of clinical trials also. Now, does Clinops has an idea to open its wings to in India also, and to give some projects to India also? That's one question everyone wants to ask.
Sure, absolutely. So we already have an office in India. We have an office in Calcutta. But obviously, as we get more customers or adoption in India, we want to grow. I'm still very much an Indian at heart. I still hold my Indian passport even after staying in the US for 20 years. So I'd love to do, had some meetings with the governments and the PMO offices also. They've shown some interest. And when we did the study with the Gates Foundation in India, we actually worked very closely with ICMR. Right. So they are very much aware of Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, who is now with World Health. She was heading, so we interacted with her during that time. So they are very aware of, what Clinops is, what eSource is. Back then, eSource was new, right? So they had a lot of these questions and, kind of vendor audit management and all that stuff. So all those are in place. So the Indian pharma companies can use our system. We would absolutely love to work with companies there and see how we can, kind of help support.
So, Avik, one more question. Can you please speak about the Clinosol teaming up with Clinosol, Clinia with Clinosol, because a lot of people wants to know.
Yeah, no, I mean, Mujib, I love to, have your ecosystem and, the bring that other side of the spectrum, which is the, the clinical people, the pharma people, the doctors, the nurses, and, data managers, monitors. We bring from the founding team. I mean, most of us are from the IITs, but we also have doctors. We also have pharma graduates. We also have data scientists from our side. But we want to work together, because technology alone can only do so much, right? So the science and technology has to kind of join hands and take clinical research to the next level. Otherwise, clinical data management will always remain clinical data management. It will never become clinical data science. And all the other verticals have adopted data science and seeing huge benefits in the last several years, decades. But somehow this industry is not there yet. Hopefully, we can kind of play a role in kind of. You see, we are working with one of the top pharma in the world, global pharma. So one of the thing that we are working on is how can we collect. So that's a kind of a breathing analyzer. It's a medical device. Data is collected from patient home. Every patient puts that analyzer, and our system on their smartphone can seamlessly capture the data from that device. And what is that data? It's a wave pattern. What is it? It's basically my breathing pattern. So let's say I breathe. That's my normal breathing. And let's say you breathe a little faster. Right? Let's say that's not your normal breathing. Now, after learning the breathing pattern of every person, the system can use AI, ML, machine learning to understand that pattern. After a few days, few weeks, I know this person breathes like this. Okay. Now, anytime there's a spike in that pattern, the system can detect that spike. Pattern recognition technology, right? I can see there's a deviation in that pattern and there's a spike. And the system is intelligent enough to think that this is not right. This could be chance of a heart attack, could be chance of a stroke. Right. I need to take a follow-up action. Right. I need to send an instant notification to this alias, right? To these, people, monitors or sponsors or CRS. So these kind of things our system can do. It can potentially save a life. These are not possible in the traditional way of doing things. Okay? So this is like completely virtual, completely decentralized, and I'm not sure if some of the companies in India are ready for that yet. But at least a hybrid model where some data can be collected from home, some data can be collected, like follow-up visits. Yeah. Have you taken the medication? How do you feel after taking the medication? On a scale of 1 to 10, what is your pain level? They don't need to come, travel, take the bus and train and tram and, stand in line for 2 hours and get an, and just for these 3 questions. No, you can do it from home remotely. Just enable it with technology. It will cost you a lot less, a fraction of a cost. Right. Total cost of operation, I'm saying. Right. And make life simple for everybody, right? So right. So yes, we want that post COVID, since there's a huge impetus and momentum into this adoption of mainstream technology in the mainstream clinical trials. Hopefully, we'll get to see these new thoughts of new ways of doing trials going forward.
Right. I'll have a last question, Avik, because it's already 1 hour. So your suggestions for pharma students who are looking for career into clinical research, that's one question. And in that question, what do you think like pharma and CROs have to start thinking, and how Cliniops can help pharma and CROs? So I'm clubbing the questions, and we have 7 more minutes.
So. Sure. So I think, it's interesting times for all of us, and it's high time we see into the future, right? How it's going to be going forward. So, one way of looking at it is we have to leave that, old normal behind and go into the new normal. We've just passed through a one-way door. There's no coming back, right? So all the changes for good that has happened is here to stay from this, technology perspective I'm talking about. And again, along this, changes, obviously everything is rushed, whether it's regulatory bodies, technology companies, pharma companies, CROs, everybody is rushing through it. It's obvious that we'll make some mistakes along the way, and it's okay to make mistakes. It's just that we leave those behind, we learn from them, leave those behind, and make sure the ones that are working, we take them forward, right? And the ones that didn't work, how can we make things work in a better way, right? So there's some learning that we all have to go through along the way. But it is all going to lead us to that new normal, right? And the new normal will look very different from the current normal, right? And we are already seeing things, drugs that would have otherwise taken, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Everybody is rushing to get them out in the market in, 18 months or in 9 months or 3 months. So these kind of things never happened, but always should have happened. I mean, it's not under pressure that we have to work like this. That should be the normal, way of doing things. Why do we need, 5 years? Yeah, certain types of studies require 5 years. Yes, they will take, but others, can we rush things? Can we speed things up? How can technology help along the way? How can processes be aligned? And how can the regulators' perspectives change? Perception to risk, adoption to risk. So there's a whole lot of things, right? That kind of leading into it. And one of the other thing I also wanted to bring out, and I say this often, is that along the way, we also need to recognize that our next gen is already in the market. And by next gen, I mean the millennials. They are the new doctors, they are the new nurses, they are the new patients as well, right? They are the CRCs, they are the pharmacists, they are the monitors, right? So they are not going to be happy, and they're not going to like if we put them that, okay, here's this bunch of spreadsheets that you have to do, this is the process that you have to follow, this is what you do, because they grew up in a different way. They grew up with instead of writing a mail, they would prefer a quick text. I'm just saying the thinking, right? Fast, right? Easy, right? So if you put them, okay, here is this cupboard, it has 12 shelves, the next 7 days you go through each one of them, take each one of them out, and try transcribing all of that data back into the system. They will not like it, right? But unfortunately, it has worked over all these years.
Right.
People are still doing it, right? But the personality or the persona of the new millennials are going to be very different.
Right.
Yes, we have to cater to the elderly patients as well. Even their adoption to technology is evolving. They have started getting used to using WhatsApp. They know what is the username, password.
Right.
They know how to boot up a iPad or a smartphone. So we can definitely leverage the adoption, minimal, non-invasive adoption of technology among our elderly patients, and provide the right kind of technology to our younger graduates, to our younger clinical trial professionals, and train them the right way, leveraging technology to its fullest, so that when they go into the market and go into the academia, pharma and CROs, they can be the brand ambassadors of new ideas, fresh ideas, right? How to make take this old process and turn it into this new process. Every change is difficult, so be prepared to get resistance, and hopefully the better idea prevails. What else can I say?
Yeah, I think Avik, the same way Clinosol also is working on digitalization, and the way our organization is working, the ideas which you are bringing, and my students are writing very good articles on the work what Clinosol is currently doing about the electronic consent or integration of data. But definitely we need more support and more kind of encouragement from you, Avik, so that our students are very good people. But can we take another 10-15 minutes, because you are telling very good points for the students, what they have to try to implement. And I think I really thank for for joining this session. Yeah, Vic, you can continue about how students have to develop their skills so that they can bring up new ideas in their company and they can implement from the start of the organization how technology plays a role and how best they can implement it.
Yeah, I mean, so what we need to do is just infuse some of these ideas early on so that they can start thinking along those lines. But implementing them in real life scenario requires something more than that. It's more than ideas, it's more than processes, it's more than technology. It's also the psychology, the mindset, because change is always difficult. And not to get frustrated, but keep pursuing it. I guess at some point, and the change will happen. And if you try 10 of those changes, you may succeed in 2 or 3 of them. But any change in the right direction is always a good thing.
Yeah, I think Avik said a lot of people. I'm sorry, I should only call Avik because see, the system which is being used in US, it's to call by name. Avik is so much elder in terms of qualification, experience, and all those things. Avik, most of people are asking this question: what is qualification of Avik, sir? Because you are
Sorry?
speaking so much about drug research, medical research. People wants to know what is your qualification. So you are a doctor or you are a pharmacist or you are a PharmD.
Well, I graduated from IIT
uh,
in BTech in ocean engineering and naval architecture. Then I went to Bombay. I was designing large ships, hydrodynamic analysis, structural analysis,
oh, okay.
to make ships safe in water. So, and from there, I came to US to do my MBA. And then I worked in technology for a good, 15 years. And then, worked mostly on the data side of things in enterprise applications, and then transitioned into data science in life sciences domain. So
Yeah,
whatever
I
I
think,
told you
guys,
about this, yeah,
uh,
yeah, no,
you go
everything that
ahead,
I was
sir.
talking about in terms of the domain is all acquired experience in the last, 7 years or
But there
so.
is some word, Abhik, in our life that change and the knowledge which we continuously learn. So we may think that once our education is completed, our learning should stop. But absolutely, I think that's the opposite direction. That once our education is completed, then we start learning more because
Yeah,
we
yeah,
day in and day out we see the challenges. Now,
yeah.
can you tell me what is the greatest achievement or greatest milestone of CliniOps during the life of CliniOps?
Yeah, I mean, see, entrepreneur life is different, and so does startups. So there's always ups and downs, and there are more downs than few ups here and there. So we had a journey which is no different, but I would say the adoption of the first customer for us was a big validation of when we received the first check, no matter how small that was, but somebody was willing to open up their wallet to pay X dollars for our adoption of our technology that we built over the last, let's say 2-3 years. So that, that gives you that, kick, that feeling that yes, somebody is willing to, pay some money for this one, right? And then once that first one happens, you take that story to the next one, and they feel more comfortable now that somebody else has used. But the first one is always very important. And then over the years, we've worked with a lot of good brands, Ivy League academic centers and top foundations, and several pharma, biotech, medical device companies, and co-authored with some very reputed people along the way. So, but yeah, I mean, there's always a start. That first one, is always the most important one, and for us, no.
Yeah, I think Avik, I'm good at this point of time with questions. Anyone has any questions or feedbacks, you can just post it. If quickly 1 or 2 minutes, we will take that questions or comments. And Avik, how about the session? How it went? And because most of people are very happy with the session, because I was sitting in this and I was thinking like I was sitting in a roller coaster and going into a very high altitude, because it is like future what is being shown in front of our eyes. That because
Ah,
I associated with technology, clinical research, data management for years together. I was working on legacy system. I was having a futuristic idea. But when I was sitting in this session, I was feeling like I was sitting in a roller coaster and going in a big ride.
You see, but Mujib, it is actually now. It is now and it is real. Yeah, so we are actually supporting trials in more than 25 odd countries. Many of them are, very happy. Most of them are, extremely happy, and we are having multiple, renewals and new contracts with all of them. So this basically, and all of them has given us feedback to improve, right? So we have a very good feedback loop as well. Okay, so for this particular customer, let's say we start working with a pharma company in India, or a pharma CRO or a CRO in India, and they use our technology. They see all the benefits that they're getting, but they also spot, let's say, two opportunities to improve, right? In Indian conditions, this is not working, or this could be done better. We are very open to those, right? So we work with our customers very closely to take those feedbacks and put that into our design, into our roadmap, into our plan, next release, so that when we are ready for the next study with the same customer, we have those taken care of. So that makes our customers so happy, right? So we constantly do that. It's we are also learning along the way. It's a journey. Right. So no product in the world is the best, or is the frozen, or is the ultimate, or nothing like that. Like, everybody evolves, and some are much higher in terms of maturity, some are much higher in terms of the how seamlessness, some are on the other side, and there's a spectrum where we all exist at some point or the other, and we all aim to kind of grow to the end where adoption is higher, people are happy, and all that stuff. And unless you have an open mind to hear feedback, negative feedback more importantly, from your customers, from your users, we cannot get to that next level. So right. We constantly do that.
Yeah, I think, Avik, so many people are saying a big thank you and a very good session, because I am able to read some of the thank you notes. A big thanks to Cliniops, and great session. Hope to have more sessions. Yeah, I'll try to talk to Avik later on after this call. Looking forward for one more session. Session was wonderful, superb session, sir. Very useful, productive session. So I think so good feedbacks, but I know how much your time is important. But I really wanted to say a big thanks from all people from India and across the world who are attending this session. Thank you, Avik. And any other questions any other suggestions or anything you can tell, and then we'll close this session, Avik.
Okay. No, thank you, Mujib, first of all, for arranging this, and thank you, everybody, all our viewers there, for your time. I'm glad you found this helpful, and you found this useful, and hopefully it got some excitement, and to think a little different. So yeah, happy to continue the conversation and collaborate in whatever capacity we can. If you have any questions, you can always look at our website, cliniops.com. We have all the social media channels, LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook. So you can drop us a note, and we can answer any questions that you may have. So, thanks a lot.
Avi. Bye-bye. Bye,
Thank
Avi.
you. Bye.